We are in New Orleans on what has turned into a horrific day down here in Louisiana. New Year's Day, a day that everyone welcomes with revelry, but today it's been a day of tragedy and the unknown remains. As we say hello to you, we'll update you on everything that has been going on. But first, Laura Rutledge, who's been reporting on this all day long. Laura, what do we know?
Well, there's a lot that we're still trying to figure out, right? And certainly, before we get to the football, I would just like to say that the football game pales in comparison to what's happened, the victims, their families, what's still unfolding, what they're trying to figure out here. And we're just thinking about all of you, and that's not enough, but I do want to just at least say that. When it comes to the football side of this, Pete Thamel just broke the news, our college football insider, that the game will be rescheduled 4 p.m. Eastern tomorrow here in the Superdome, so it'll be 3 local time. I think that was important for both teams, Paul, because they are looking at a shorter turnaround here, and again, they have all said certainly the tragedy is far more crucial than what we're talking about here, but for the sake of the football side of it. So currently, Georgia, Notre Dame, they have both been inside their hotel rooms. As you see the statement there from the All-State Sugar Bowl Committee CEO Jeff Hundley, devastated about the terrible events from this morning. Both of the teams were on lockdown inside their hotels and have remained there ever since the news came out, Paul. And they've been trying to do some practices, some meetings. Georgia telling me they were looking at a ballroom to try to do some practice. And they were also, though, waiting to find out when the game would be played. So at this point, that's what we know. And then the final thing I would point out is that there has been an influx of law enforcement here in New Orleans. So here at the Superdome alone, they did a sweep again of this stadium this morning, which included police dogs going around. They're checking for explosives. Everything was determined safe here. That's why they opened the Superdome back up, why we could get in here. And then they have added an extra layer of security to enter the Superdome outside and then also inside. That will be present as they prepare for this game tomorrow.
Yeah, and Laura, as far as the team aspect, I was with some parents in the hotel earlier, and they went over to see their son, who's plays for Georgia, and you've been reporting on this, but just for the audience who has not been with us all day, that they're in a similar state of shock as everyone in this city, if not the entire nation. And now that we know that the game will be tomorrow afternoon, and part of the reason for that, of course, is that Penn State has already played, and they will play the winner of this game next week. As we look at a comment and statement from Commissioner Greg Sankey, who will be here for the game, and I know it sounds trite at a time like this, but for Georgia to have had to play tomorrow night and Notre Dame as well at 8:45, meaning they wouldn't get back home to the next day, and the game would already be scheduled for the following Thursday night. Seemed unfair, and I know that was part of the discussion. But the bigger conversation is the security tomorrow, and I'll let the authorities speak for themselves. But this is not going to be the same setup as it would have been for tonight, and there will be announcements, but you're already hearing them as you have heard them all day. It is going to be a lockdown.
Yeah, I mean, heightened security. Even when we got into this stadium today, multiple searches. They're going to do everything they can to keep this as safe as possible. And, you know, when we heard from government officials earlier today here in New Orleans, that was the big emphasis. That was why they said, as much as it was a tough decision to postpone the game, and ultimately the right decision, they wanted public safety to be paramount. Now, one thing that's worth pointing out, they've actually asked, Louisiana officials have asked for the help of the public to try and figure this out, because they have said that the suspect did not act alone. And so that is a big key. And one of the reasons why there's going to be heightened security is because they are still investigating. It's an active investigation. They're trying to figure out if anyone else was involved, who they are, and what that looks like.
And Laura, on that, just from talking to law enforcement officials, and you can't help but run into them everywhere in this town, there's a lot that the public at large doesn't know that New Orleans police, the FBI, do know. And not to scare anyone, but the reason why this game didn't go off today had much more to do with what is at large.
Yes.
And there's a grave concern about, and not that we don't know, but they do know, and they are actively searching for multiple people. And I think that's one reason why they had to make the decision.
That's
to
true.
Postpone it.
Yes, and when you hear from people here, when you've heard from the statements that have been made by the FBI, normally you hate to say normally because it does lend itself to knowing that we have too many of these tragedies, but when something like this happens, they will often say the suspect acted alone as soon as they can confirm that. They have been adamant to not say that. And again, as we take this back to the Sugar Bowl, which is hard to do, the reason why they wanted to make sure that they had more time to investigate this and to secure areas and hopefully we'll find out, maybe have those people in custody that could have been involved here, accomplices potentially. They needed more time to make sure that this would be as safe as possible. And, the other big discussion point here, Paul, has been that New Orleans is hosting the Super Bowl in February. So security will be massively heightened for this. And I imagine we'll see a blueprint of how they might handle that in February now that this horrible terrorist attack has happened.
The Super Bowl it's so much larger in comparison to what we were about to witness tonight. And in listening to some of the news conferences today, it was surreal. As I know you reported, just sitting out, looking out your window, seeing police cars heading to the quarter, and trying to watch a football game that really didn't seem important at all, even though I know it is.
Yeah, I think that's what we're all struggling with here. And there are so many bigger struggles. And I just can't help but think about the families that have been affected. ABC News has interviewed a few people that had family members or friends who were killed in these attacks. And to imagine what they're grappling with today is just unfathomable and what they'll continue to grapple with. And so I think, too, part of this is trying to encourage fans even to stay inside today. One of the city officials even said this is not a day for sightseeing. This is not a day to be out and about. You have to remain safe. And they really are hoping that people in the general public can help them with this investigation. Anything that they see, they want to see and have reported. And meanwhile, all this is going on and you're talking to some of these players' families and people in these hotels who are here for the game. The players, the coaches, they're trying to figure out what to do. I spoke with Kirby Smart a couple of times today, and of course he's trying to manage the schedule and all of that while also thinking about what's actually happened here and how awful that part of it is. There is a Georgia student who was critically injured, who's been receiving medical treatment, and many have talked about that student as well. So there's just so much of it, so many layers to it. And again, we'll see this game played right behind us in what we expect to be an extremely safe environment here. Law enforcement has done so many things, taken so many steps to secure this Superdome and the surrounding area.
And to further explain, for those in New Orleans, the reason why they're calling it an active crime scene is that the suspicion, it's more than a suspicion, it's that they feel very comfortable that there are multiple people at large, and if this happened the way it went down, that they may very well be hidden somewhere, and that's those are just more reasons, because when we both heard this earlier this morning, the natural inclination was some local who went crazy on New Year's Eve. But this isn't a local story. I mean, this is a global story right now of epic concern.
They found much evidence that it was a planned attack, and they're still sifting through a lot of that. But what we can report is what they found in the house that the suspect was staying in. There were many explosives. There were things of that nature. Those, of course, were found throughout Bourbon Street as well. And so you see that this had been calculated and was planned. And again, to your point, and what we've heard from the officials is that they can tell that this was an attack that had accomplices involved. They don't know to what level that involvement is and what ties may also be a part of this, but that is the main reason, I believe, why ultimately they made the decision to postpone, and why we're seeing so much more law enforcement and security in the area, as we should.
Yeah, and I realize most of you have seen all of this all day long, but the decedent had an ISIS flag on his car. Anyone who has followed any of these things since 9/11, these groups usually work in a large unit. They're usually suicide bombers, and the way this went down, it's still puzzling because of the people at large. But anyway, I'll let you give. I know you have a lot to do, but we appreciate you coming by, and look forward to happier days.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, just I know there are a lot of people even still fighting for their lives right now in critical care. So just sending a lot of prayers to everybody dealing with this.
Well said.